Good morning and afternoon, and thank you for joining our live webinar, Getting Started with VMware Cloud on AWS. Today, VMware and SecondWatch, an AWS APN Premier consulting partner, will explain how we can help seamlessly extend your data center into the cloud with VMware Cloud on AWS. Before we get started, let's take care of a couple housekeeping items. We will have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar, but feel free to ask questions at any time via the questions tab on the screen. After the webinar, there's a feedback tab if you'd like to rate the webinar and provide feedback that we can use to take into consideration for future webinars. With that, I would like to introduce you to Ray Kalmbach, VMware Solution Architect, and Eric Deer, SecondWatch Solutions Architect. Take it away, Ray.
Thank you very much, Melissa. Good morning and good afternoon to everybody. We appreciate you joining us for this Getting Started with VMware Cloud on AWS, sponsored by myself and Eric Deer from SecondWatch. We hope these next 30 to 45 minutes will be very informative, and let's progress. So, when we talk about VMware on AWS, VMware Cloud on AWS and AWS native services being a jointly engineered solution, it's exactly what we're referring to. This is not two companies that put their logos on top of a PDF and then send it out to their customers and said, here you go. This is where our engineers actually sit with the AWS engineers every single day, and we work on this solution, and we have been working on the solution for the last 2.5 years. And we're excited to where this has brought us today. Basically, what we're doing is we're delivering a rich VMware SDC environment with the same consistency and familiarity with VMware tools and technologies, allowing you an easy path to take your workloads and create portability and bring in those hybrid capabilities along with the direct access to the AWS native services, and then existing with new apps and containers with VMs. When we take this entire solution, this is giving us new capabilities with old applications and legacy workloads, and bringing them into the AWS world where we can give them access to the AWS services. When we first started off this, we deployed originally into US West Oregon, then we moved to US East Virginia, and then we moved into, for our European customers, into Frankfurt in Germany, and then we spread out to Asia, and now we're starting to make our way back across the globe, round trip. We've now deployed into AWS California, now in Ohio, and we're expanding. And when you look at this slide, you'll see numbers within these dots of where we are and where we're going. Those numbers represent how many availability zones we are in each one of those regions. So what is VMware Cloud on AWS? This is the VMware full stack SDDC delivered inside of the AWS global infrastructure. So imagine taking your private on-prem data center and actually picking up, lift and shifting it into the AWS data centers. And then what we do is we give you connectivity between your SDDC and AWS services, where now you can start to give legacy applications access to AWS native cloud services, and the costs are only those of what the cost would be. There's no egress charges. This is fully supported by VMware. If there's a remediation problem, if there's an upgrade or a path or something like that that needs to be done, it's all managed by VMware. It's then taking into account the on-demand capacity and flexible consumption model of the public cloud. The same way you can burst and expand the EC2 instance, you can now do with the VMware host environment. You can very seamlessly add hosts to your SDDC when work demand is needed, and then when that work demand comes down, you can spin those hosts back down. Again, it's fully operated by VMware. It's seamless workload portability. You get the global AWS footprint with reach and availability, and you get direct access to the native AWS services. So when we're connecting the clouds, when we're talking about this hybrid cloud connectivity between public and on-prem and going out into the public space, how are we doing that? Well, one of those, the two different ways we do that is either by a VPN connection. That VPN connection could be an IPsec tunnel with existing network infrastructure. We can then take an NSX edge and put that into your on-prem data center and extend layer 2 that way. Or you can have a layer 2 VPN with full NSX deployed on premises. The other way that we're doing this is through AWS Direct Connect, where we take AWS Direct Connect going into your on-prem data center, we split off a couple of VIFs, and then you can connect your SDDC in the public cloud with your on-prem data center and then have workloads and egress and things that way going across the Direct Connect. Direct Connect is definitely the most preferred way to go because you have a higher bandwidth and stability options there when you're using Direct Connect, but understand you can very easily do this over IPsec VPN tunnels also. So once we have that connectivity between the two different clouds, what are we doing with those workloads? How are we getting them from on-prem into the public space? This is a utility that we give. It's called HCX, Hybrid Cloud Extension. And what HCX does, it gives us the ability to migrate those workloads bilaterally, either from on-prem to the public space or from the public cloud back to the private space. Excuse me. With great speed and stability. We can now live vMotion thousands of VMs at one time, or we can do cold migrations on a scheduled timeline. This is a great way to get your workloads from on-prem into the public cloud space, or vice versa, and be able to have that secure bi-directional traffic, and it's engineered with WAN acceleration and compression that give us some very big throughput through smaller pipes. I apologize. Should let that slide build out. I do apologize. Scale for the most demanding consumers. So creating SDCs, there's no practical limit to the number of SDCs you can have. What we do is with a production cluster, we have to have a minimum of 3 nodes inside of a production cluster. With that, 3 nodes can be extended up to 16 nodes. And then you can have 16 nodes inside one cluster. And you can have up to 10 clusters per an SDDC. So that's 160 hosts per an SDDC, and there's no real limit to how many SDDCs an organization can have. So you can have multiple SDDCs running for multiple environments or multiple divisions of your corporation or enterprise, and be able to have pretty much unlimited capacity based upon those needs. Again, 3 nodes for a production cluster, up to 16 hosts in that production cluster. Then you can have 10 clusters per an SDDC organization, and then you can have as many SDDC organizations as you would like. Just keep in mind there is a limitation that you do have one SDDC organization to one VPC mapping. So that's 160 nodes, 160 hosts inside of one VPC mapping, basically, is how that works out too. One thing I do want to point out on this slide that talks about hosts, storage per host. We do have about 5.2 terabytes worth of storage per host, and that's actual usable space. So within a 3-node cluster, you can get about 15 to 18 terabytes worth of storage, and then with dedupe and compression, you can actually get that up to about 20, 21, 22 terabytes worth of storage. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about, hey, do I need 3 hosts? Do I need 10 hosts? Do I need 16 hosts? Keep that storage limit in mind, because that will somewhat dictate how many hosts you need for your environment. Customer use cases, this is where, where do we take the solution? Where does it fit best? We have a lot of customers that are using this for disaster recovery. They don't want to be in the data center business anymore, or their DR data centers are costing them too much. Maybe they have a DR data center lease that's up for renewal, and they're looking for a better solution. So this is where you can use VMC. Instead of having your 8, 10, 12, 16 hosts you may have inside of a data center somewhere, you can subscribe to just the bare minimum host that you need to be able to handle seeding your VMs to the cloud. And then once you have a DR disaster or a DR test that you need to do, we can use Elastic DRS, spin up as many hosts as you need that your workload demand generates. Then you only pay for those hosts as you need them. When you no longer need those hosts, either your DR event is over, your DR test is over, you can scale right back down to the bare minimum. This allows you to only consume the bare minimum hosts you need to support the seeding of your workloads into the public cloud space. This is a great way to limit your DR data center costs, or if you don't have a DR plan currently, this is a great way to establish one and get a DR solution in place for your workloads. This naturally turns into a data center extension. So a lot of times what happens is DR works so well inside of VMware Cloud on AWS, customers start to say, hey, I could actually use this extra capacity in other ways. So they actually start to use VMware Cloud on AWS as an extension of their on-prem data center. Then it kind of naturally floats into, well, you know what? I've moved my DR into VMware Cloud on AWS. I've moved my data center extension needs into VMC on AWS. Why am I in the data center business at all? It's not what we do best, it's not what we do well, and it's very expensive. So why don't we just take all of our workloads and migrate them into VMware Cloud on AWS, where we can truly use infrastructure as a service and no longer maintain those physical data center presence. So first use case is disaster recovery. Second one then kind of naturally forms into data center extension. Then it kind of moves into cloud migrations. And especially where SecondWatch really comes into play here is next-gen applications, where now we take legacy applications, we start to take different pieces of them and parts and interactions of AWS native services and start to build those into our current workloads that are running in a VMware environment. So now I can take RDS, I can take Route 53, I can take Lambda, I can take all these different cool tools that are AWS native, and now I can start to integrate them in with my legacy applications that are now sitting inside VMware Cloud and AWS. So with that, if there are any questions, we can handle those after the presentation. I'm going ahead and I'm going to turn it over to Eric Deer.
All right, thanks, Ray. Yeah, I'm Eric Deer, Cloud Solutions Architect with SecondWatch, and actually one of our specialists in VMware Cloud on AWS, and kind of an aficionado actually over time. So first, I'm going to give a little background on SecondWatch and maybe a little discussion about our partnerships with both AWS and VMware. And then, you know, some of the compelling reasons to implement VMware Cloud AWS, and to show you also how kind of the ways in which we help orgs adopt the cloud. So, all right. So, to those familiar with AWS, you've probably heard of us. Our name comes up at reInvent quite often, that sort of thing. But if not, if you're strictly a VMware on-premises shop, a little introduction. We're kind of a full-featured cloud solution provider. We have a large group of cloud consultants as well as a managed service practice, and we do the full life cycle of cloud journey. So we can assess your full on-premises, applications, all of your infrastructure, and transform and evolve that into a future state inside the cloud. So we definitely help accelerate you to the cloud, and we've been doing that for quite some time, since about 2010. And then once you're already in the cloud, we allow you to evolve and optimize in terms of DevOps, adopting new models, taking a look at your estate and trimming it down for the most cost-effective patterns, that type of thing. So what you see at the bottom is our solution accelerators, and what those are is kind of a prepackaged offerings that we have that are typical patterns that we see time and time again, and that we produce a framework, which is something that our organizations use to help them fix and solve problems, these pain points that we see time and time again. So you can see things like our Cloud Factory, which is a migration methodology, some of our optimization. We have some of the best optimization features in the cloud space. And specifically today, we're going to talk about our VMware Cloud on AWS Solution Accelerator, which is we see as people have a hard time. Where do we start? How do we learn to adopt VMware Cloud? How do we get into cloud? What's the first step? This is our method of kind of the easy button to get into the cloud. So that's a little bit about SecondWatch, some of our offerings. And one of the reasons that we're a key partner to help with this is that people know VMware and there's people that know cloud. Well, we've become that partner who knows VMware and cloud. So we were one of the original premier partners in AWS. In fact, we were the first batch ever inducted to become a premier partner, which is the highest level of consulting partner. So we have 100% certified engineers. We have many AWS competencies, and those competencies are kind of a stamp of approval from AWS that says, yes, you are tested and you've done this work in the past, and we are, we're basically certified to perform some of these activities. So in terms of AWS, we are one of the best and most skilled hands-on keyboard partners. And that skill is what led us to our relationship with VMware. And we were kind of hand-selected because being a born-in-the-cloud partner, which means we don't have any on-premises, we don't have any legacy infrastructure, we are strictly working in the public cloud. So we have all of our staff trained and certified on VMware Cloud AWS. So we have sales engagement, pre-sales, we have delivery engineers, consultants, as well as our full integration of our managed services. So we have all the skills to implement things like NSX, HCX, those advanced offerings. And of course, our forte comes with as Ray said, the integration of those advanced services with your existing workloads. So, trying to, evolve and adapt into the public cloud, as well as take advantage of the scale and AWS services is kind of key here. So that's the reason we are kind of a match made in heaven, if you will. So a couple of points you're probably asking, why, if I could just go to the cloud, why would I, go to VMware? Well, the fact is that there is a lot of lift, a lot of new learnings that have to take place. There's, refactoring, changing your apps to be more cloud native is difficult and time consuming, and sometimes it's just not worth the investment. What is worth the investment, however, is taking advantage of any managed service. So imagine now you have to do hardware refreshes. You've got to keep all the VMware patched at the right levels, maintain version control of everything. That takes a full operations team. So as a managed service, you've got all that is off your plate. You just have to maintain your workloads, and the same thing is done in AWS. Those services are managed. You don't have to keep control of any of that. So that is the motivation to move into the public cloud. So in this graphic, you see that clearly 83% of workloads are virtualized. We all know that. That's expected. But cloud adoption is at an incredible rate right now. 60% of people are running stuff in the cloud. And if you aren't already, you're probably thinking about it. And what's key to that is that you have to have a strategy. Do you go all the way into the cloud? Do you use multiple clouds? Well, as things evolve, we realize that there's, certain workloads, connections back to on-premises, local data centers, those are all still required. So the hybridity piece is key and is one of the main features of VMware Cloud AWS. The ability to move back and forth, to expand and contract in and out of the public cloud is one of the key things, using HCX and other tools. So that's what we see here is the strategy moving forward for most people's cloud adoption. And to that end, we see the mixture of VMware and AWS in the cloud actually is the most streamlined and straightforward way to move into the cloud because you're already using all your familiar tools. All of your people are already trained. You don't have to learn a new ecosystem. And then when you go to adapt those AWS services, you slowly can learn and evolve with it, as opposed to just being thrown into a completely new environment with a completely different method of management. So your existing VMs can migrate directly to the cloud, and then as you want to modernize, you refactor and format and take advantage of AWS. So you get all the benefits without some of the drawbacks, right? You still get the scaling. You only pay for what you use, and then again all the access to the broad range of services. So SecondWatch itself, we have produced some kind of packages and offerings to help take advantage of the service and do the heavy lifting for you. So this is kind of the range of things in which we have to offer to help that. So the first thing is the Explorer. We do offer complementary environment discovery, and both the Explorer and Trial go into a little more detail on those. But so we do offer what we call a solution accelerator, which I mentioned earlier, that allows almost like a pilot. It doesn't necessarily have to be production ready. It allows you to pick your workload of choice, one that you think is applicable, and we can help you make that decision as well. We'll move that into the VMware Cloud AWS offering. We'll set up all the necessary AWS infrastructure. We will help migrate that workload, and then we'll work with you to test it, to connect to some AWS services, whether it be storage or database and other managed offerings, and kind of do the kicks to the tires approach. And then the next is, as Ray mentioned, full migration. If you're ready to go all in, SecondWatch has cut our teeth for years on mass migrations into the AWS public cloud with thousands and thousands of VMs. So if we're ready to do that, and as Ray described, the cluster sizing and the ability to scale is literally massive. So data center evacuations, perfect use case, and we're well equipped to take care of that. And then, as I've mentioned, that integration, we love to work with those native services to evolve your applications and really take advantage of the scaling and cost savings that are built into AWS. All right, so a little bit more on those offerings and how we can help you. The first is the complementary environment discovery, and this is a pre-sales engagement where, if you want to talk a little bit more in depth with us about what your workloads are, what your future strategy is, what type of workloads you have that may be applicable to move into the cloud, we'll sit down and kind of take a look at that and see what that would look like. We'll kind of give you some of the best practices to change your infrastructure, talk about how to leverage AWS and how that account design might work with your organization. And then, of course, we'll give you some next steps to either do a pilot, do a test, or maybe create a production environment or a dev test environment for you, and give you a proposal for what that would look like and what that would take from us. And so once we get through that environment discovery, we would actually go to the solution accelerator, which is just that, as I mentioned. Choose a workload, get it into there. It's kind of a jump start for your hybrid cloud. You have the ability to use HDX and do the vMotion between on-premises and the cloud. And then we do all of that setup for you. So if you have no existing AWS account structure, we create your footprint to best practices with security in mind. Again, this can be done as a kind of a test or pilot, or maybe the beginning of a production. The great thing about VMware Cloud AWS is you can move from a single node test to a full production cluster with just a press of a button, and it's the scaling is just simple and actually pretty amazing. So you can do things like test site recovery if you're looking at a DR use case, and this is just a great way to do this in an easy, straightforward fashion. And a little bit more, I think, on the next slide. Yeah, basically, it's about a 4-week engagement. So we'll come in and actually do that assessment of what you have, take a look at your version, see what it would take. We take care of the networking considerations, the VPN considerations, or direct connect if you're interested in that, and you basically get to trial that workload and test those hybrid cloud capabilities. And in addition, we will look at what it takes to deploy into the Amazon VPC, connect to a database service or storage, and use that as the backing for your application as necessary. All right, and kind of in summary, VMware Cloud you know, as Ray said, it's been worked on for a couple of years. When it first came out, you know, I had questions, didn't understand what the significance was, but now over time, as I said, I'm actually a huge proponent of it. It's really, you know, exciting as someone who used to use VMware, and it really is the path of least resistance, right, for getting an existing application into cloud. You know, there's literally no major transformation work to be done. You only get the benefits of being into the public cloud, right? And of course, you need someone that understands AWS, understands the ecosystem, the security concerns, and SecondWatch as that consultant, we're really ready to do the heavy lifting, right, to put those pieces in place and to get you into the cloud, and then, you know, to get all those benefits. All right, Melissa.
Thank you. Thank you, Eric, and Ray. That was great information. Let's open it up for questions. While we're waiting for some of those questions to come through, again, we'd love to hear your feedback. There's the opportunity to provide some feedback on the feedback tab. This webinar will be on demand on the SecondWatch Bright Talk channel, and I will include the link in the post-webinar email, as well as a link to download the PDF of the presentation itself. All right, it looks like, do you have, we have a question here. Do you have an offering available that allows me to explore how this might be relevant for me, perhaps 2 hours, some time and some consultation work?
Yeah, I'll take
Eric?
that. Yes, that is the environment discovery service that I mentioned. So that's a pre-sales complementary offering. It can take 1 to 2 hours, and that's where we will actually look at your environment, see what you're running on premises now, help you choose a workload that might be applicable to move into VMC, and you know, give you more details on how it actually operates for you.
All right, great. Looks like we have another question here. Can the HCX be used across multiple VMware VPC? If we wanted a dev VMware and test VMware and a production VMware, can the HCX be configured to share across all three, dev, test, and production?
Sure. So basically what we would end up doing is we would end up taking the HCX appliance and deploying them into those separate clusters. I'm assuming this customer has a dev test cluster, has a test cluster, and a production cluster. So we would take an HCX OVA appliance, deploy them into those individual clusters, and allow you to migrate workloads that way. I hope that answers that question.
Thank you, Ray. How involved do you get during the Accelerator service? And is that like a hands-on keyboard type of experience? I think, Eric, that might be best for you.
Yeah, right. So, you know, of course, the definition of a consultant is open to the imagination sometimes, but at SecondWatch, consultants, they are the ones doing the work. They are hands-on. So we have various different types of customers. Usually it's the do it with me or the do it for me. And so we adapt to either of that. If you just say, SecondWatch, take my workload, move it, get it running, yeah, we can do that. But we also are big advocates of the cloud and training. We can also work with you to show you how to do that, work with you to do it to your best practices, and consult with you at the same time. So yeah, it's absolutely up to the customer on how we handle that.
All right, great. Looks like we have another one here. Can I migrate my Oracle, RAC, and SAP apps to VMware Cloud?
Absolutely. So VMware has really taken this, VMware and AWS has really taken this approach of better together, right? So, you know, AWS native in the past has had issues with trying to put Oracle RAC into AWS native because of shared storage, multicasting across layer 2 networking, things of that sort. So now you can take an Oracle rack in a virtualized environment and deploy that into VMware Cloud and AWS. And now you can take different aspects of that Oracle rack or that SAP HANA database and expose it into AWS native. So say you want to take Redshift and pipe some of that data off the Redshift so you can do some analytics around it or something along those lines. This is where you had that flexibility with taking Oracle rack or SAP HANA or Microsoft SQL and putting it inside VMware Cloud and AWS.
All right, great. What option is there for those VMware clients that want to go into Azure and AWS? Some clients don't want to be locked down into a specific public cloud provider and want to have a presence in Azure and AWS.
So right now, VMware Cloud AWS is only VMware Cloud is only supported on AWS. So this is a VMware workload that's running inside the AWS walls, I guess you could say. Right now, VMware does not technically support that same functionality in Azure. So if you wanted to take a VMware workload and put it in Azure, you would have to refactor that workload for Azure, where with the VMware Cloud and AWS, that's not the case. You can leave that workload to be somewhat agnostic because it's still sitting in a VMware hypervisor, but now it's sitting in a VMware hypervisor inside of AWS. But unfortunately, that is not that functionality does not exist for Azure.
Thank you, Ray. We'll give everyone another minute to submit any additional questions. Doesn't look like there are any more coming through. So Ray and Eric, thank you so much. And everyone, thank you all for joining. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.